You feel the sway of the ship beneath your feet. The tang of salt on the wind, the heavy scent of damp wood and canvas, tells you everything you need to know about where you are. Look out across the endless horizon, shimmering with the promise of new worlds. This is the age of exploration, a time when daring captains steered wooden vessels into uncharted waters, mapping continents and defying the limits of human endurance. But beyond the famous names and the glorious tales of discovery, lies another story. It is the story of the thousands of forgotten sailors, the ordinary men who braved unimaginable perils, only to be lost to the depths, their sacrifices fading from memory. Join us now as we dive into their unseen world, and uncover the harsh realities of life and death on the high seas. You stand now on the docks, the rough cobblestones cold beneath your boots. The air buzzes with a different energy here. It is not the grand pronouncements of kings or the learned debates of scholars that draw these men to the sea. No, it is a chorus of whispers, a symphony of desperation and audacious hope, all converging on the dark hulls that bob rhythmically in the harbor. Why would anyone step aboard one of these wooden prisons, leaving behind everything familiar for a journey into the terrifying unknown? Why would a man choose a life that statistics told him would likely end in a watery grave? For many the choice was no choice at all. Look around you. The sprawling cities of Europe in the 15th and 16th centuries were not havens of opportunity for the common man. Life was often brutal, short, and defined by the struggle for survival. You might be a landless peasant, struggling to feed your family from meager harvests, perpetually indebted to a lord or a merchant. Perhaps you are an apprentice in a stinking tannery, your hands raw, your future as predictable and grim as the smell of curing hides. Maybe you have committed a small crime, owing money you cannot pay, or simply seeking to escape a past that pursues you relentlessly down narrow, crowded alleyways. For these men, the land offered little but toil, hunger, and an inescapable social order that offered no upward mobility. Then comes the call. It is not always a sweet song. Sometimes it is the heavy hand of a press gang, their leader's voice booming over the din, forcing you into service. You are dragged from a pub, your half-empty pint glass clattering to the floor, or snatched from a quiet street corner, your protests ignored. You are now a sailor, whether you wished it or not, signed onto a vessel destined for far-off lands, your fate sealed by the king's warrant or the captain's greed. But for countless others, the call was a deliberate, if often misguided, choice. Picture yourself in a smoky tavern near the docks. The air is thick with the smell of cheap ale and pipe tobacco. A grizzled old salt, missing an eye and half a finger, is spinning tales of unimaginable riches. Gold from the New World, spices from the East, pearls the size of pigeon eggs. He speaks of exotic lands where the sun always shines, where trees bear fruit you have never seen, and where native peoples are easily swayed by a few trinkets. He does not tell you about the scurvy that rots your gums and makes your teeth fall out. He conveniently omits the months of starvation, the weevil-ridden biscuits, or the brackish water that is more worm than liquid. He certainly will not mention the storms that can snap a mast like a toothpick, or the treacherous reefs that tear a ship's belly open in an instant. No, he speaks only of the return. The triumphant homecoming, stepping ashore a wealthy man, able to buy land, open a shop, marry a beautiful woman, and live out your days in comfort. For a man with nothing, this promise, however faint, shines brighter than any gold coin. It is a gamble, yes, but what is life on land if not a different kind of gamble, with even lower stakes and far less potential reward? You walk towards the gangplank, the heavy oak groaning under your weight. Before you step aboard, you are often asked to sign the ship's articles. If you are one of the few who can read, you might scan the dense, cramped script. It outlines your duties, your meager pay, and the harsh penalties for insubordination or desertion. You might be promised a share of any plunder, a small percentage of the cargo, or a bonus for safe return. These promises, however vague, are enough. You are betting your life, your very existence, on the chance that this journey, unlike all the others, will be different. You believe you will be one of the lucky few. This is the great deception, both self-imposed and externally reinforced. The age of exploration was fueled not just by imperial ambition and scientific curiosity, but by the desperate hopes of ordinary men. They clung to the notion that the vast, intimidating ocean was a path to a better life, a route to escaping the shackles of their birthright. They gambled their present suffering against a future glory that for almost all of them would never arrive. Consider the reality of the vessel you are about to board. It is a wooden shell, often poorly constructed, packed with men, animals, and provisions that will spoil long before the journey is halfway through. Sanitation is non-existent. Disease is a constant, invisible passenger, lurking in every cramped corner, ready to sweep through the crew with terrifying speed. Typhus, dysentery, malaria in tropical zones, and the ever-present scurvy, these were the silent, relentless killers, far more deadly than any rival fleet or storm. You hear the shouts of the boatswain urging you forward. The ship smells of tar, stale sweat, and the faint, sweet decay of already rotting food. You clamber over coils of rope, dodge swinging crates, and descend into the gloomy depths below deck. This will be your home for months, perhaps years. You will sleep in a hammock slung between beams, inches from your shipmates, the air thick and stifling. There is no privacy, no comfort, only the constant creak and groan of the ship, the slosh of bilge water, and the knowledge that you are now utterly at the mercy of the wind, the waves, and a captain who may be a benevolent leader or a tyrannical monster. The gamble extends beyond the physical perils. It is a gamble of identity. You are no longer the farmer, the baker, the weaver. You are a sailor. Your world shrinks to the confines of the ship, your companions a motley collection of men from every walk of life, bound together by the common enterprise and the shared fear. You learn to live by a new code, one of hierarchy and brutal discipline, where a flogging is a common punishment and death at the yardarm is a grim possibility for mutiny or serious transgression. As the lines are cast off and the sails unfurl, you feel the ship lurch, slowly pulling away from the familiar shore. The docks, the city, the life you knew, all begin to recede, shrinking into the distance. You watch until the last familiar landmark disappears below the horizon, swallowed by the vast, indifferent expanse of the ocean. It is at this moment, perhaps, that the full weight of your gamble truly settles upon you. The siren's call has lured you in, promising a treasure chest of dreams. But now, as the land vanishes, you are left with the cold, hard reality of the sea, its true nature slowly revealing itself in the endless, rolling waves. The promise of glory seems a distant, fading echo, replaced by the immediate, overwhelming question of survival. Will you be one of the fortunate few who return, or will your name join the countless others whispered only by the sea itself? The voyage has only just begun. The sun, once a comforting warmth, now beats down with an oppressive intensity on the open deck. You seek refuge, descending into the belly of the beast, leaving the vast blue expanse of the ocean and the ceaseless sway of the waves behind. The transition is abrupt, a stark plunge from bright, open air into a gloom that seems to cling to your very skin. Immediately your nostrils are assaulted. The crisp salt tang of the open sea is replaced by a suffocating cocktail of odors. This is the smell of humanity packed too tightly for too long. Unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and the metallic hint of fear. Layered beneath this is the earthy, cloying aroma of bilge water, a stagnant brew of seawater, refuse, and the unknown. You can detect the pungent reek of human waste, musty mildewed wood, and the unsettling sweetness of decaying provisions. Every breath is a taste of the ship's grim reality. This is the air you will breathe for months, perhaps years. Your eyes struggle to adjust to the gloom. Flickering lanterns cast anemic pools of light, barely pushing back the encroaching darkness. Shadows dance, distorting the cramped space. The deck above groans constantly, timbers creak and whine with every roll and pitch. You hear the rhythmic lapping of water against the hull, a chilling reminder of the thin wooden barrier separating you from the crushing depths. And beneath it all, a scuttling sound, a whisper of tiny feet. Rats are your constant companions, fearless and numerous, sharing your space, your food, and your fate. This is your new home, the lower decks, a labyrinth of cramped, low-ceilinged compartments. No private cabins for men like you. Instead, a vast, communal space, a jumble of humanity suspended in tightly packed hammocks. These canvas slings are your only sanctuary. They hang so close that a neighbor's breath stirs the air above your face. You feel the ship's tremor, hear the hushed conversations, the restless sighs, the heavy snores. No escape from collective misery. Privacy is an alien, forgotten luxury. The air, thick and heavy, becomes a physical presence, especially when hatches are battened down. Ventilation is minimal. The heat, humidity, and pervasive stench combine to create an atmosphere more like a tomb than a ship. Weeks stretch into months in this suffocating environment. Your skin grows perpetually damp. Your clothes, stiff with grime, become a second skin, rarely changed, never clean. Food, the very fuel of life, is a monotonous, unappetizing affair. Your diet: ship's biscuit, hard as rock and riddled with weevils, a protein source you tolerate out of necessity. Alongside this, salted beef or pork, cured heavily, often tough, flavorless, and old. Sometimes, the meat is so rotten it glows in the dark, yet hunger often overrides caution. You force down the gritty, salty mouthfuls, knowing this meager sustenance is all that stands between you and starvation. Fresh fruit and vegetables are a distant memory, a luxury long exhausted, leading to a creeping menace that will slowly claim shipmates. Water, the most vital commodity, is rationed severely. Stored in large wooden casks for months, it becomes brackish, slimy, and foul-tasting. You learn to drink it warm, to ignore the bits of algae, to quell your thirst with a liquid that feels more like punishment. Every drop is precious, consumed with desperate gratitude, knowing that without it, your end would come swiftly. Clean, fresh water becomes the stuff of dreams, a haunting yearning. This harsh diet and brutal living conditions make disease an inevitable, terrifying companion. Scurvy is the sailor's plague, a slow, agonizing death. It begins subtly, profound weariness, then bleeding, swollen gums, loosening teeth. Old wounds reopen, never healing. Your skin erupts in purple blotches, joints ache with excruciating pain. Eventually you collapse, body ravaged, mind fading. Many will succumb to this invisible enemy, their bodies giving up, their spirits broken. But scurvy is not the only killer. Dysentery spreads like wildfire, tearing through the crew with fever and dehydration. Typhus, spread by omnipresent lice, turns men into raving wrecks. Every cough, every shiver, sends a ripple of fear. A simple fever can quickly spiral into a death sentence, with no doctors, no medicine, no escape. The ship becomes a floating incubator, a coffin for the living. Hygiene simply does not exist. No baths, no fresh clothes, no way to truly cleanse yourself. You live in your own grime, a testament to brutal reality. The latrines, rudimentary holes or buckets below deck, are cesspits of filth, breeding grounds for illness. Their stench alone turns your stomach, a constant reminder of degradation. You scratch at the itching, the crawling sensation of lice, an inescapable torment. It is a battle against indignity you cannot win. The days below deck blur into an endless cycle of watch duties and repairs, a constant struggle against the ship itself. Off watch, you retreat to your hammock, but even sleep offers little respite. The ship's relentless motion and persistent sounds disrupt dreams, which are often haunted by home or the terrifying specter of the sea. Boredom becomes a heavy cloak, dulling your senses. The monotony, the endless chores, the lack of stimulation, all wear down your spirit. You yearn for anything to break the sameness. Yet, amidst this squalor, a strange camaraderie forms. Shared hardship forges bonds stronger than any on land. You rely on shipmates for a helping hand, a shared laugh, a moment of human connection. You learn to read moods, offer comfort, share the last scraps of tobacco. This fragile solidarity keeps many from despair. But even this bond is tested daily by looming threats. A sudden squall transforms the lower decks into a hell of flying objects, violent pitching, and the terrifying roar of the storm. The ship groans, timbers shriek. You fear it will tear itself apart. You brace yourself, clutching rough wood, praying for dawn, for calm, for survival. And every day brings the omnipresent threat of a lash from a brutal officer, a mistake met with swift, unforgiving violence. As weeks turn into months, the initial sense of adventure is long gone. What remains is a grim determination, a stubborn will to survive. You are not a hero, not a famed explorer, but a cog in a vast, indifferent machine. You are one of the forgotten, a nameless body powering the grand ambitions of empires and kings, sacrificing your health, your sanity, your life for a dream never truly your own. The world below decks is a constant test, a crucible that either breaks you or hardens you. For many, this world would be their last. The vast, hungry ocean above and the squalid confines below would become their final resting place, their stories lost to the waves, their names whispered only by the creaking timbers that carried them to oblivion. The oblivion you face is an active, howling, and insidious force, not a quiet fade into the vast indifference of the ocean. It begins sometimes with a shift in the wind, a sudden darkening of the sky that turns the limitless expanse above you into a menacing ceiling. You watch the barometer fall, a harbinger of chaos. The air grows heavy, charged with a premonition of violence. The experienced sailors, those who have seen the ocean's true face, move with a grim urgency, their eyes scanning the horizon, reading the subtle signs of an impending fury. Then it hits. Not as a gentle breeze, but as a violent slap, a powerful hand that shoves your vessel sideways. The wind shrieks, a banshee wail through the rigging, tearing at your ears. The ship, once a sturdy platform beneath your feet, becomes a living, bucking beast, fighting for its life against an invisible assailant. You are thrown against the bulwark, your hands scrambling for purchase as the deck lurches beneath you. Water, in solid sheets, sweeps over the bows, cascading across the deck, turning every surface into a treacherous slide. You taste the salt, feel the icy shock against your skin, even through your sodden clothes. Orders are shouted, barely audible above the roar of the wind and the thunderous crash of waves against the hull. You are scrambling aloft, a perilous dance high above the churning abyss. Your fingers, raw and aching, grip the stiff, wet ropes, pulling, hauling, fighting to furl sails that whip and flap with the force of 1,000 angry giants. One slip, one moment of inattention, and the ocean claims you, swallowing you whole. You feel the mast sway violently, threatening to tear the ship apart. Below, the deckhands are lashing down anything not already secured, battling the relentless surge of water that threatens to swamp the vessel. Every muscle in your body screams in protest, but you push through, driven by a primal need for survival. Hours bleed into days. Sleep is a distant memory, replaced by desperate labor and hypervigilance. You are pumping the bilge, a rhythmic, soul-crushing task that never seems to end. Water sloshes around your ankles below decks, a constant reminder of the ocean's persistent attempt to claim its prize. The stench of stale water, sick, and fear hangs heavy in the air. The ship groans and creaks, a symphony of stress and imminent failure. Each wave that breaks over the bow sends a shudder through the entire structure, and you wonder, with every shudder, if this will be the one that finally splinters the planks and timbers, sending you all to the crushing depths. When the storm finally abates, leaving behind a heaving, exhausted ocean, the silence is deafening, almost eerie after the sustained roar. You stand on a deck battered and scarred, looking at ripped sails, splintered spars, and a horizon that seems utterly unchanged, indifferent to the terror you have just endured. The immediate threat has passed, but the storm leaves its mark not just on the ship but on you. The exhaustion is bone deep, a heavy cloak that wraps around your limbs, pulling you down. Your body aches in places you didn't know existed. But even as you tend to the repairs, patching what you can, the next invisible enemy is already at work within the cramped, unsanitary confines of the ship. This enemy is sickness, an insidious predator more relentless than any gale. It begins subtly, perhaps with a persistent cough or a dull ache in your joints. Then the telltale signs of scurvy begin to appear, a blight that plagued sailors for centuries. You watch in horror as your shipmates succumb. Their gums swell and turn purple, bleeding at the slightest touch. Their teeth loosen then fall out. Old wounds, long healed, reopen, oozing and festering. Their skin becomes mottled, covered in dark, bruising patches. A profound lethargy sets in, draining them of all energy, leaving them listless and weak. You see the fear in their eyes, the understanding that their body is turning against them, slowly, agonizingly disintegrating from the inside out. The ship's surgeon, often a barber by trade with little medical knowledge, is powerless. His remedies are rudimentary, bleeding, purging, crude poultices that offer little more than false hope. There are no fresh fruits, no vegetables, no citrus to fight the creeping plague. The disease spreads like wildfire through the crew, especially in the close quarters below decks where fresh air is a luxury and hygiene is a forgotten concept. You step over the bodies of the sick, their moans a constant, chilling accompaniment to the creaking of the ship. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of illness. Scurvy is not the only killer. Dysentery, a violent and debilitating affliction, sweeps through the ship, fueled by contaminated water and lack of sanitation. Fever rages, burning through bodies, leaving its victims delirious and weak. Smallpox, typhus, and other infectious diseases find fertile ground among a weakened, vitamin-starved crew. Every cut, every scrape, a common occurrence in the rough work of sailing, becomes a potential death sentence, easily infected in the unsanitary environment. Gangrene sets in, and the surgeon, with a saw and a bottle of rum for anesthetic, performs gruesome amputations, a desperate measure that more often than not simply delays the inevitable. Death becomes a constant companion, a grim reaper stalking the decks. Each morning a few more faces are missing from the muster. The bodies are sewn into canvas shrouds, weighted down with cannonballs and slid over the side, a perfunctory prayer whispered as they disappear into the depths. There is no time for grief, only a moment of silence before the living turn back to their duties, knowing that the same fate could easily be theirs tomorrow. You grow numb to it, a necessary defense mechanism against the overwhelming despair. And then there is the gnawing, ever-present reality of starvation. The food you receive is barely sustenance. Hardtack, a biscuit so hard it can break teeth, is your daily bread. Often, it is riddled with weevils, a protein source you learn to endure. Salted beef or pork, cured months ago, is tough, stringy, and often rancid, tasting more of brine and decay than meat. It is a struggle to chew, a greater struggle to swallow. There are no fresh provisions, nothing green or vibrant to nourish your weakening body. Your stomach constantly rumbles, a hollow ache that never truly goes away. Water, precious and rationed, is often foul, stored in stagnant casks for weeks or months. It tastes brackish, sometimes slimy, and it is never enough to quench the deep, abiding thirst that parches your throat and dries your mouth. You dream of fresh, cool spring water, a simple luxury now a distant, unattainable memory. The lack of proper food and clean water is not just a discomfort. It actively undermines your health, making you more susceptible to every disease, every infection. Your body begins to consume itself, drawing on its own reserves, leaving you gaunt, weak, and barely able to perform the demanding tasks required of you. The constant deprivation wears not just on your body but on your spirit. Morale plummets. Hope dwindles. Arguments erupt over meager rations, over perceived slights. The once strong bonds of camaraderie fray under the relentless pressure of hunger and despair. You find yourself consumed by thoughts of food, fantasizing about meals you once took for granted. The world shrinks to the immediate, desperate need for nourishment, for a moment of relief from the aching void in your belly. So, you stand on this ship, a fragile shell against the vast, uncaring ocean, battling not just the fury of the elements, but the insidious decay of disease and the slow, grinding torment of starvation. You are constantly teetering on the edge, one storm, one epidemic, one spoiled cask of water away from becoming another nameless statistic, another forgotten sailor swallowed by the insatiable sea. Your daily existence is a testament to extraordinary endurance, a relentless struggle against overwhelming odds, far from romantic notions of grand voyages. You are not exploring, you are surviving. You are merely trying to breathe another day. You are merely trying to breathe another day. And yet, even as you struggle for that breath, an unseen enemy is already at work within you, within your shipmates. It is a slow, relentless killer, more insidious than any storm, more pervasive than any mutiny. It is the shadow of scurvy, a predator that stalks every long voyage, claiming lives with a quiet, horrifying certainty. You might not notice it at first. The initial signs are subtle, easily dismissed as the ordinary fatigue of a harsh life at sea. A general weariness settles into your bones, a tiredness that no amount of rest can alleviate. You might attribute it to the constant labor, the poor sleep, the unceasing rocking of the ship. Your limbs feel heavy, your movements sluggish. Perhaps you find yourself out of breath after a simple climb up the rigging, a task that once required little thought. This creeping exhaustion is the first whisper of the unseen predator. Then the true horror begins to manifest. One morning as you chew your meager biscuit, a dull ache reverberates through your gums. You probe with your tongue, discovering they feel spongy, tender to the touch. A day or two later they begin to swell, becoming a purplish, sickly hue. The pain intensifies, making it agonizing to eat. You watch, horrified, as your shipmates experience the same fate. Their teeth, once firm and strong, loosen in their sockets, some falling out with a ghastly plink against the deck or into their hands during a desperate attempt to eat. The mouth, the very gateway to nourishment, becomes a festering wound. The smell, a putrid blend of decay and infection, hangs heavy in the close confines of the lower decks. But the mouth is only one battleground. You might notice strange purple spots appearing on your skin, particularly on your legs and arms. These are not bruises from a fall or a misplaced blow. These are subcutaneous hemorrhages, tiny ruptures beneath the skin, evidence of your body slowly failing to hold itself together. They spread, coalescing into larger, darker patches, turning your skin mottled and sickly. Old scars, wounds that had long healed and faded, might begin to reopen, weeping fresh blood as if the body is reliving its past traumas. It is a grotesque spectacle, a living map of internal decay etched onto your very being. Your limbs, once strong and capable, start to swell. Your legs become thick and heavy, your ankles disappear into puffy mounds. The pain in your joints intensifies, making every step a torturous effort. You struggle to climb the ladders, to pull the ropes, to perform even the simplest duties. The muscles, deprived of something vital, waste away, replaced by a strange, gelatinous softness. You become a shadow of your former self, your strength ebbing away with each passing day. The ship, once a vibrant community of hardy men, transforms into a floating hospital, then a charnel house. You witness the once boisterous quartermaster reduced to a whimpering child, his mind clouded by delirium, his body riddled with open sores. You hear the labored breathing of the carpenter, his chest rattling with a cough that never ends, his body racked with internal bleeding. The once proud boatswain, now a skeletal figure, lies in his hammock, unable to move, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrors your own. You see men die, not in a heroic battle, but in a slow, agonizing surrender, their bodies consumed from within. The psychological toll is immense. The fear is palpable, a cold dread that clutches at your heart every time you feel a new ache, see a new spot on your skin. You watch your friends succumb, one by one, and you know deep in your bones that you are next. There is no escape, no known cure. The ship's surgeon, a man of limited knowledge and even more limited resources, tries his best. He might offer a concoction of sour beer or a poultice of herbs gathered from some distant shore, but these are often desperate guesses, futile attempts to fight an enemy he does not understand. The prevailing theories are wild and varied: stale air, bad humors, idleness, even homesickness. The true cause, the absence of a simple vitamin, remains a profound mystery, a cruel cosmic joke played on the brave souls who dare to venture beyond the sight of land. Imagine the horror of watching your gums bleed uncontrollably, your teeth loosen and fall out, your body covered in purple blotches, your muscles wasting, old wounds reopening, all while sailing across an endless ocean. There is no port of call where fresh fruit and vegetables await. There is no understanding of what your body desperately needs. You are trapped, a prisoner in your own decaying flesh, on a wooden prison adrift in the vastness. Scurvy was not a rare affliction. It was the silent destroyer, claiming more lives in the age of exploration than storms, shipwrecks, or enemy attacks combined. Expeditions that set out with hundreds of men often returned with only a handful, the vast majority having fallen victim to this invisible scourge. Vasco da Gama lost 2/3 of his crew to scurvy on his first voyage to India. Magellan's epic circumnavigation saw hundreds perish, leaving fewer than 30 men to complete the journey. These were not isolated incidents, they were the norm. The logs of countless voyages are filled with grim tallies of the dead, each entry a testament to the relentless march of the disease. You would see it in the eyes of your captain, the desperate hope in his gaze whenever a distant island appeared on the horizon, only to be replaced by grim resignation when no suitable provisions could be found. You would feel the collective despair of the crew as another man was lowered into the sea, wrapped in a canvas shroud, his death another notch on the long list of scurvy's victims. The rituals of burial at sea become heartbreakingly frequent, each splash of the body an echo of your own impending doom. The disease strips you not just of your health but of your dignity, your humanity. The constant pain, the putrid smell, the inability to perform basic functions, the desperate, unfulfilled craving for something fresh, something green, something that will stop the agonizing decay. You might dream of crisp apples, tart lemons, fresh greens, waking to the reality of salt pork and hardtack, knowing that these very provisions, though keeping starvation at bay, are simultaneously feeding the unseen predator within. This invisible foe was the greatest enemy of any mariner. It turned robust, strong individuals into helpless invalids, then into corpses, often within a matter of weeks or months once the fresh provisions ran out. It decimated crews, turning ambitious explorations into voyages of pure attrition. It was a constant, terrifying companion on every long voyage, an ever-present shadow lurking beneath the deck, waiting for its moment to strike. You are not fighting a visible foe with a sword or a cannon. You are fighting your own body, or rather, your body is fighting itself, dismantling itself piece by piece, while you, the unwilling witness, can do nothing but endure the terrifying process. This, then, is the true cost of venturing into the unknown, a silent, agonizing price paid by forgotten sailors, lost not to the waves, but to a hidden deficiency. You have endured the creeping weakness, the aching joints, the loosening teeth. You have witnessed the insidious march of disease across the decks, claiming friend after friend, leaving you to wonder if your own turn is next. The silent, agonizing price of exploration is paid not just in health, but in the slow erosion of the human spirit. For weeks, then months, you endure the cramped, disease-ridden confines of the ship, the endless horizon offering no solace, only a mocking promise of more suffering. Your body, a vessel of pain, begins to mirror the ship itself, battered, strained, creaking under the immense pressure of the unknown. But beneath the deck, within the very heart of the crew, a different kind of storm begins to brew. It is not born of wind or wave, but of despair, injustice, and the brutal realities of life at sea. Imagine the ceaseless toil, the relentless watch, the meager rations barely sustaining life, let alone spirit. Imagine the constant threat of the lash, the arbitrary cruelty of a captain or an officer, their word law, their mood the only justice you know. You are but a cog in a vast machine, disposable, expendable, your life less valuable than a coil of rope or a spare sail. Hope, that most vital of human needs, begins to curdle in this bitter brew. The initial thrill of adventure, the promises of glory and riches, have long since faded, replaced by the grim certainty of endless suffering. You see the faces around you, gaunt and hollow, reflecting your own growing desperation. The fear of death by disease or starvation looms large, but another, more dangerous emotion takes root, the burning fire of indignation, the rage of the exploited. This is the point where the silent suffering of the forgotten sailor sometimes gives way to open defiance. Mutiny, that most dreaded word on any ship, was not always an act of premeditated evil. Often, it was a desperate gamble for survival, a collective cry against unbearable conditions, a last-ditch effort to seize control of a fate that seemed predetermined for misery and death. Consider the voyages that stretched for years, the food supplies dwindling to moldy biscuits and putrid water. You watch as your companions succumb, their bodies tossed unceremoniously into the vast, indifferent ocean. The doctor, if there is one, is often as helpless as you are, or worse, drunk and uncaring. The captain, perhaps driven mad by the isolation and the immense responsibility, becomes a tyrannical monster, inflicting brutal punishments for the slightest infraction. A flogging for a spilled bucket, a week in irons for a whispered complaint. The line between discipline and sadism blurs. You, the common sailor, are trapped. Desertion is often impossible in the middle of a vast ocean. To go overboard is certain death. To speak out is to invite the lash or worse. But the human spirit, even when battered and broken, possesses a remarkable capacity for rebellion, especially when pushed to its absolute breaking point. The whispers begin in the dim light of the forecastle, away from the prying eyes of the officers. Low voices, furtive glances, a shared understanding of the unbearable. Perhaps it starts with a refusal to work, a collective slowdown, a quiet act of defiance. But it can escalate quickly, fueled by desperation and a sense of shared injustice. One man, bolder than the rest, voices what everyone fears to say aloud: "We cannot go on like this. The stakes are astronomically high. To attempt a mutiny and fail means certain death, often a slow and agonizing one, a warning to all who might follow. To succeed means taking control of a ship you may not be able to navigate, turning it towards an uncertain future, perhaps towards piracy, perhaps towards a desperate return home, facing charges of treason." But for men who felt they had nothing left to lose, these risks sometimes paled in comparison to the torment they already endured. The history of the age of exploration is dotted with these desperate acts. While the grand narratives celebrate the intrepid captains and their discoveries, they often gloss over the violent eruptions from below deck. Think of Magellan's circumnavigation, a voyage of incredible endurance, but also one marked by a brutal mutiny attempt just 5 months in the desolate Patagonian Bay of San Julian. 3 of his 5 captains rebelled, tired of the relentless journey, the dwindling supplies, and Magellan's iron will. Magellan, ruthless in his response, crushed the mutiny with swift and brutal force. 1 captain was drawn and quartered, another beheaded, their bodies displayed as a grim warning. 2 more mutineers were marooned, left to face the elements and wild animals, a fate surely as terrifying as death on the gallows. This was not an isolated incident. Mutinies plagued many expeditions. Henry Hudson, for example, met his end not in an ice floe or at the hands of indigenous people, but cast adrift in the frozen waters of Hudson Bay by his own disgruntled crew, abandoned to the unforgiving wilderness with his young son and a few loyalists. Their crime? Pushing the crew too hard, too long, too far into the ice, their provisions dwindling, their hope extinguished. These acts of rebellion highlight a fundamental truth about these epic journeys. they were not just triumphs of navigation and discovery, but also crucibles of human suffering and desperation. The forgotten sailors were not just victims of disease and nature, but often victims of their own leaders, pushed to the limits of endurance, physical and psychological. Their rebellions, whether successful or failed, were desperate pleas for agency, for a recognition of their humanity in a system that often treated them as mere chattel. You might imagine the terror of a captain waking to find his crew armed, their faces grim, their eyes burning with a desperate resolve. You might imagine the sudden shift in power, the world turned upside down. But also, consider the terror of the mutineers themselves. The fear of failure, the fear of reprisal, the crushing weight of their actions. They were not criminals by nature, but men driven to extremes, often by hunger, by disease, by the lash, by the knowledge that their lives were being squandered for someone else's glory. Their stories are often buried in the footnotes of history, overshadowed by the grand narratives of discovery. We remember the captains who sailed into the unknown, but we rarely remember the ordinary men who, when faced with an agonizing, drawn-out death, chose instead to fight, however futilely, for their very lives. Their rebellion was a desperate cry against the silent killer that stalked the ship, and against the tyrannical hand that often exacerbated its effects. When you stand on the deck of a replica ship today, feeling the wind on your face, looking out at the endless blue, try to imagine not just the romance of discovery, but the suffocating despair that could transform a hopeful crew into a desperate band of rebels. Feel the cold dread of knowing that your shipmates, once comrades, might now be your executioners, or that you yourself might become the one to take up arms. This was the bitter turning point for many, when the dream of exploration curdled into a nightmare of human conflict and the ultimate struggle for survival, not against the waves, but against the very authority meant to guide them. This was the dark side of ambition, paid for with blood and despair, etched into the forgotten legacy of the age of sail. But for countless others, the struggle, whether against sickness, starvation, mutiny, or the lash, ended not with a return home, but with a different kind of embrace. For the vast majority, the ocean itself became their final, vast and unmarked grave. Imagine standing on the deck, not in a moment of rebellion, but in a moment of profound loss. A shipmate, perhaps someone you shared watch with, someone whose stories you knew, has finally succumbed. His breath has stopped. His journey is over, far from any familiar soil. There is no churchyard here. No solemn procession through hallowed ground. The ship is a world unto itself, and its rituals of death are dictated by the unforgiving elements and the relentless passage of time. You watch as his body, often sewn into a canvas shroud, perhaps weighted with a cannonball or a piece of ballast, is carried to the rail. The ship's bell tolls a mournful, solitary note that struggles to carry across the immense expanse of the waves. A few words might be said, a hurried prayer offered to a God who seems impossibly distant in this limitless blue domain. Then, with a final heavy heave, the body is committed to the deep. You hear the splash, a sound both sharp and strangely soft, quickly swallowed by the rhythmic churning of the sea against the hull. The ripples expand for a moment, then fade, leaving the surface unbroken, a vast, indifferent mirror. Your shipmate is gone. Not just from the ship, but from the world you know. He has vanished into the abyss, his earthly presence dissolving into the vastness. Close your eyes and try to envision that descent. Feel the chill of the water as it closes over the form. See the sunlight, which moments before was brilliant on the waves, dimming rapidly. It shifts from bright blues to deeper indigos, then to shades of twilight green. The surface world, with its winds and its light, recedes with astonishing speed. Down, down, the body sinks, passing through layers of current and temperature, into a realm where silence reigns supreme. The sounds of the ship, the creak of timber, the slap of waves, the calls of the gulls, all become muted, then vanish entirely. There is only the soft, crushing pressure of the water, an immense, enveloping weight. As you plunge deeper into this imagined realm, the light finally gives way to absolute darkness. The water itself becomes colder, denser, a liquid blanket. The pressure mounts, an unseen force that would crush any living thing. But for the silent traveler, it is merely the condition of their eternal rest. Down here, far beneath the reach of storms and sunlight, a different kind of world exists. A world of incredible slowness, of strange, luminescent creatures, of volcanic vents and ancient rock formations. And into this world, the forgotten sailor descends. What becomes of him there? The ocean is an incredible, complex ecosystem. The fabric shroud may offer brief protection, but eventually, the tiny scavengers of the deep begin their work. Small crustaceans, fish adapted to the crushing darkness, all play their part in the ultimate recycling of life. Slowly, meticulously, the flesh returns to the ocean from which it came. The bones, denser, more resilient, may persist longer, slowly becoming encrusted, perhaps settling on the seafloor, indistinguishable from the myriad other fragments and particles that accumulate over millennia. This is the ultimate anonymity. No headstone marks their passing. No plot of land holds their name. Their grave is the entirety of the ocean, a monument of boundless water. Millions of sailors, fishermen, explorers, merchants, and even involuntary passengers have met this fate across centuries of maritime history. For every famed explorer whose name echoes through the halls of history, there were hundreds, thousands who perished in the pursuit of his ambition, whose names were recorded, if at all, only in a ship's log, quickly forgotten by all but the closest family, who themselves were left with only the terrible certainty of absence, and the aching void of never knowing precisely where their loved one lay. Think of the vastness of the Pacific, the formidable power of the Atlantic, the treacherous currents of the Indian Ocean. Each holds untold numbers of these silent graves. A ship goes down in a storm, caught in a sudden squall, or struck by a rogue wave. Every soul aboard is lost in an instant. No trace remains. The vessel itself, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition, becomes a tomb, carrying its crew down to the depths, where it too becomes part of the silent, underwater landscape. You can almost feel the crushing weight of that absence. Families on shore, gazing out at the horizon, waiting for a ship that would never return. A mother, a wife, a child, forever scanning the coastline, their hopes slowly dissolving into a gnawing certainty. They would have no closure, no place to mourn, only the endless rolling expanse of the sea. This was the brutal reality for countless communities dependent on the sea, the constant companion to the romance of adventure and the promise of new lands. Sometimes, a shipwreck becomes a sort of time capsule. In cold, anoxic waters, away from currents and scavengers, objects can be preserved for centuries. A cannon, a ceramic plate, a leather boot. But the human remains, the very bodies of the forgotten sailors, are far more ephemeral. They become part of the geological record, perhaps, microscopic traces in sediment, but rarely do they retain their human form for long. The ocean reclaims them utterly. It processes them, breaks them down, and integrates them back into its enormous, living system. This is the ocean's silent embrace. It is not always gentle, not always welcoming, but it is absolute. It is the final destination for those who dared to challenge its power, or who simply lived their lives upon its surface. It holds their secrets, their bones, their stories, in a vast, dark archive accessible to almost no one. When you look at the sea today, consider not just its beauty and its power, but its profound role as the greatest cemetery on earth. A place where millions of lives ended, unheralded, unremembered by most of humanity, but cradled forever in the deep, silent waters. Their presence is a faint echo in the crushing pressure, a whisper in the currents, a silent testament to the incredible human cost of the age of exploration. They are the true forgotten ones, their memories dissolving like salt in the endless ocean. And yet, sometimes the ocean does not keep its secrets so absolutely. Sometimes, through a strange alchemy of currents, sediment, and time, a faint trace remains. A whisper that can be heard if you know how to listen. The deep, dark archive of the sea, while vast and largely inaccessible, occasionally offers up a page, a fragment, a name. This is where the dedicated few step in, the silent guardians of the forgotten, the underwater archaeologists who descend into the abyss, not to conquer but to remember. Imagine yourself now not on a rolling deck above the waves but beneath them. You feel the cool embrace of the water pressing in from all sides. The light from the surface struggles to penetrate, becoming diffuse, then a ghostly blue, and finally, nothing but the beam of your own lamp cutting through the absolute dark. The silence here is profound, broken only by the steady rhythm of your own breathing amplified in your ears. This is the realm where exploration shifts from outward voyage to inward discovery, a journey into the past. You descend, a solitary figure in a vast, liquid cathedral. The seafloor slowly comes into view, a seemingly featureless expanse of sand or mud, until your light catches an anomaly. A subtle change in texture, a slight rise, a discoloration. It might be nothing, or it might be the faintest outline of a tragedy that unfolded centuries ago. This is often how it begins, with a barely perceptible hint that something lies buried, waiting. The work is slow, painstaking, and utterly unforgiving. Every movement is deliberate, every breath measured. The water itself is a heavy cloak, resisting your efforts, yet also protecting the fragile remnants of the past. You learn to move with it, to think in 3 dimensions, to fight the urge to rush. For down here, impatience can shatter centuries of preservation. You begin to clear away the silt, a delicate dance of suction dredges and soft brushes. Slowly, meticulously, the form begins to emerge. Not a ship as you might imagine it, intact and majestic, but often a fractured skeleton, timbers scattered, cargo strewn across the seabed like discarded toys. Yet each piece holds a part of the story, a clue to a life abruptly ended. Perhaps you find a cannon, its bronze or iron encrusted with marine growth, a silent sentinel of defense or attack. Its shape and size might tell you about the ship's origin, its power, its purpose. Then nearby, perhaps a tangle of rope, preserved in the anaerobic mud, a ghostly shadow of the rigging that once strained against the wind. It speaks of the sails that drove them forward, the hands that wrestled with the lines, the strength and skill required to master the sea. But it is often the smaller, more personal items that truly resonate, that reach across the centuries to touch your spirit. You might uncover a leather shoe remarkably preserved, its stitching still visible, hinting at the foot that once wore it, a man who walked the decks, feeling the roll of the ocean beneath his soles. Or a pewter plate, bent and scarred, bearing the faint imprint of a hand that held it, a mouth that ate from it. These are not just objects. They are echoes of daily life, suddenly made tangible. Imagine uncovering a gaming piece, carved from bone, perhaps a die or a pawn from a chess set. You can almost hear the laughter, the shouts, the quiet concentration of sailors trying to pass the long hours at sea, finding a moment of reprieve from the relentless grind. Or a personal coin, clutched tight in a pocket, perhaps the sum total of a sailor's worldly possessions, a link to a family far away, a future that would never come to pass. Sometimes, more poignantly, you might find an intricately carved wooden cross, or a simple rosary, fallen from a hand that sought comfort and salvation in a storm. These artifacts speak of faith, of fear, of the deep human need for hope when facing the overwhelming power of the sea. They remind you that these forgotten sailors were not just anonymous figures in history, but individuals with hopes, fears, beliefs, and dreams just like you. The sheer volume of material is staggering. Crates of ceramic pots that once held fresh water or salted meat. Tools, chisels, hammers, awls that shaped the wood of the ship or mended sails. Scientific instruments, an astrolabe, a compass, that guided them across uncharted waters, tools of daring and ambition. Each item, no matter how mundane, is a piece of a puzzle, a word in a silent testament. And what happens when human remains are discovered? It is rare given the ocean's relentless processes, but it does occur. A femur, a skull fragment, sometimes even more complete skeletal remains encased in concretions of sediment and iron. These are treated with the utmost reverence. They are no longer just archaeological finds. They are the physical manifestation of the forgotten, the final, undeniable proof of a life lived and lost at sea. With careful scientific analysis, these remains can sometimes reveal the age of the individual, their diet, even the illnesses they may have suffered. They can provide a face, a human reality to the statistics of loss. Every recovered artifact, every painstakingly recorded detail, contributes to a larger tapestry. These underwater sites are not merely shipwrecks, they are time capsules. They offer snapshots of a specific moment, frozen in the cold embrace of the deep. They show us not just how ships were built or how trade routes operated, but how people lived, what they valued, what they suffered, and what they left behind. The stories they tell are varied. Some speak of mutiny, others of heroic endurance. Some reveal the opulence of royal expeditions, others the desperate scramble for survival on a leaking merchant vessel. They illuminate the brutal realities of life at sea, the class divides, the perils of disease, the constant struggle against the elements. They challenge romanticized notions of exploration, showing the true cost in human lives. By bringing these artifacts to the surface, by carefully conserving them and studying them, we are doing more than just recovering history. We are performing an act of remembrance. We are pulling these forgotten souls back from the dissolving salt of anonymity, giving them a voice, allowing their stories to be told once more. The challenges are immense. The deep is a harsh mistress. Preserving waterlogged wood, metal, and organic materials requires specialized techniques and considerable resources. The pressure of the deep, the corrosive effects of salt water, the sheer logistical difficulty of working hundreds of feet below the surface, all conspire to make this one of the most demanding fields of archaeology. Yet, the work continues, driven by a profound sense of responsibility and curiosity. There are countless more wrecks to be found, countless more stories waiting to be unearthed. Each dive is a journey into the past, each discovery a conversation across centuries. You realize that beneath the shimmering surface of the ocean, there lies an untold library of human experience, a silent chorus of forgotten voices, waiting for us to listen. And as you ascend from the dark, carrying perhaps a small fragment of their world, you carry with it a profound sense of connection to those brave, often desperate souls who ventured forth and ultimately paid the ultimate price, their echoes now reaching us from the deep.